When the world won't bet on you, the only gamble left is to bet on yourself. And in MMA, no one embodies this more than Nate Diaz.
If you want to be successful in this business, and if you want to do good in this business, you don't have to follow the leader.
For years, the UFC lowballed him, buried him in pay, and tried to force him to play by their rules. He was never the most dominant fighter in the cage, but he always knew his worth, and that's exactly how he beat the game, by flat out refusing to play by its rules. Even before he ever stepped foot in an MMA gym, Nate already had one big role model guiding him. Growing up in Stockton, it was easy for a teenager to end up on the wrong path. At an early age, he got involved in several street fights and carried the weight of that environment everywhere he went. The thing is, he didn't really know how to fight.
Police call my house. My mom's like, "You're suspended already. 5 days," and I'm like, "All right, cool." And I'm sitting there, and my brother's like, already on the way. I'm 13. How old are you when you're a freshman?
Yeah,
13, 14 years old. My brother's 15, and he's like, "What's up? You want to come to the gym with me? I'm headed to train right now." I was like, "I'm gonna chill." And he's like, "You better get up off your ass with that shitty performance earlier at the park." And I was embarrassed. I grabbed my shit like, went to the park, went to the gym with him. And I started training right there.
What's funny is that unlike his brother, he never really liked training, but things were pretty rough for the two back in the day. He once recalled having nothing to eat at home, and the only reason he kept training was that some of the older guys at the gym would buy him a burrito after practice, and all that training eventually paid off. Nate made his professional debut in 2004, while Mick was already fighting guys like Robbie Lawler in the UFC. In his early MMA career, he was a promising lightweight, with a fighting style that sort of mimicked his older brother by mixing up boxing with elite BJJ. But his brother's presence in his life turned out to be both a blessing and a burden. While the two brothers always had each other's backs, the comparisons on the outside were inevitable. After going 5-2 in MMA, he joined the 5th season of The Ultimate Fighter, and that's when the label of Nick's younger brother really stuck.
People ask me about being Nick's brother all the time, like, "You're in the shadow of Nick Diaz." And I'm like, so bad about the shadow of Nick Diaz. Better him than the shadow of Carl Parisian? That'd suck.
By then, Nick was already one of the most popular lighter weight class fighters in the world. Despite a few setbacks in the UFC, he finished a big few names like Lawler and Tabao, and even competed in Pride, finishing the biggest star in Japan at the time, Takanori Gomi, with a freaking Gogo Plata, all while competing as high as a kite.
He tested positive for the Gomi fight, and they said there was so much weed in his system when they tested him that he had to be high when he was fighting. So what he did was just get ripped, just completely ripped, and then went out there and fought Takanori Gomi and just outboxed him. Can you imagine that?
By all means, getting rid of the stigma of the other Diaz would be a difficult task, but Nate still had his entire career ahead of him, and things started off well for him. His strong personality, also a trait of the Diaz's, made him pick up quite a few fans during the show. He was clearly the most talented fighter of the season, which ultimately resulted in him finishing all of his opponents and later winning the show. Now, he was officially a UFC fighter, ready to let go of the little brother shadow and finally stand on his own. One thing about Nate, which remains true to this day, is that the Californian always had a knack for entertainment, and this resulted in him becoming a fan favorite among hardcore fans. On top of being a competent athlete, he always had a talent for providing memorable moments on the mic.
I've been cornering Nick since he started, like before the UFCs and stuff, so I get experience there and fighting, training, so it just feels like he knows what I know I should do. He's my training partner. If he thought I should do something, he'd tell me specifically, but he didn't really. He just train hard. He says, "Go beat that ass, don't be a bitch."
There you go. Goodness. Nice job. Back to you.
Once the wins started to stack, he became one of the most popular prospects in the organization. His fights were always exciting, so much so that he won bonuses of 3 of his first 4 fights for the promotion. It seemed like Nate was ready to reach the top, compete at the highest level, just like his brother was doing. But the road ahead was far from easy. Stories like Nate's don't get told enough. If this one resonated with you, hit subscribe to check out future videos. Reality came crashing in soon enough. After a 5-fight win streak in the UFC, Nate's first loss came in the hands of Clay Guida. The bout was as exciting as it gets, but ultimately his opponent got the nod. From then on, a pattern began to emerge. Nate would win a couple of fights and then lose to the guys near the top of the division. And after losing to guys like Joe Stevenson and even Gray Maynard, whom he had already beaten in The Ultimate Fighter, his lightweight run hit a wall. Another interesting trait of the Stockton brothers is that they never seemed to think they lost a fight. As far as Nate, Nick, and his fans are concerned, the two are pretty much undefeated to this day.
I did win that fight. Only people who thought I lost that fight were the judges, but who's that? Who were the judges? You know what I'm saying?
In a sense, this mentality helped the Diaz's maintain their status as fan favorites despite facing several setbacks through the years. It was around that time that the first contract issues began to emerge. Nate began growing frustrated with the fact that he was making very little money, even less than some of the guys he beat. This frustration was what prompted him to move to welterweight for the first time, arguing he wasn't paid enough to cut to 155. And the fact that he was even able to find mixed success at 170 despite being undersized against pretty much everyone is a feat of its own. After 2 wins and 1 fight of the night bonus, Diaz eventually slid back into the losing bracket once competition stiffened. He went on a 2-fight skid, including a 3-round beatdown at the hands of Rory McDonald. Meanwhile, the shadow of his brother's success only grew larger by the day. After all, at this exact point in time, Nick Diaz was the main event of one of the biggest cards ever in his title fight against GSP. Nate's public clashes with the UFC and its alleged unfair payment model didn't go unnoticed by the boss.
Why do you think he's rebelling so much?
Who?
Nate Diaz.
Nate?
Yeah.
The kid makes really good money, you know? And the unfortunate part is he's not a needle mover. His brother is a needle mover. He's not.
Funnily enough, he has openly admitted that after winning The Ultimate Fighter, he thought he had already made it. The winner of the season got a 6-figure contract with the UFC. What he didn't know, however, was that these 6 figures were cumulative and not per fight.
My first UFC contract, I believed I was rich. And then after my UFC contract, I realized I wasn't rich.
Nate eventually dropped back to 155, and this time he was ready to give it his all. Winning the reality show and being a prominent popular fighter wasn't cutting it, so he began playing by the UFC's rules. And what ensued was the most successful run of his career when looking at the quality of his opponents. He beat Gomi, Donald Cerrone, and Jim Miller, earning 3 performance bonuses while doing so. For the first time, he climbed through the rankings, positioning himself at the top, ready to challenge Benson Henderson for the lightweight strap. And going against the notion that he wasn't a draw, Diaz vs Henderson got one of the highest viewerships ever on Fox. But the jump in competition proved too much for him. After getting his eye completely shut in the very first round, Henderson dominated the rest of the fight, coasting to an easy decision victory over Nate.
I was trying to wait for the eye to recover and I could see straight because I knew it was coming back and I knew it would come back strong from it, but never did. I ran out of time with it and sucks, but whatever. That's what happens. Good job, man.
And things would get even worse from there on. In his next fight against Josh Thompson, Diaz was bested in a way he had never been beaten before. While he'd later mastered the art of losing and still maintaining some of his fan appeal in the past, there was no getting around that one. Thompson hit Nate with everything he had, and while Nate's chin is as durable as it gets, the beatdown was so one-sided that his own corner had to throw in the towel. Bloodied and battered, with barely any money to show for it, Diaz hit the lowest point of his UFC career. To make things even worse, this recent 2-fight losing streak came at the very end of Diaz's contract. This meant that he had little to no leverage for a significant pay bump in a new contract. It looked like the end of the road. He tried moving the needle on Dana White's terms, but few ever succeed in playing by those rules. The thing is, instead of giving up, he decided to play the game his way. With a dream of a title and better pay fading, Nate began the 3rd chapter of his career. Competing with the best seemed like it wasn't his focus anymore. Instead, Nate would invest all his chips in getting noticed. Challenging the UFC became kind of his thing. He came back to face Gray Maynard for a 3rd time, but only a week before the fight, he threatened to pull out to attend a high school reunion. And he had every reason to switch gears. Despite beating the brakes off Maynard in their 3rd match, Nate reportedly netted only $30K, while his opponent got paid $45. The deal is, Diaz was back, and he kinda didn't care anymore.
Dana, one of the impressive things about Nate is, how much confidence he has, and it's like he came into the fight on a 2-fight losing streak, yet he said in the ring afterwards, I think Gilbert Melendez and I are the best lightweights in the world. Do you think that you need to have that kind of confidence in order to succeed at the level that he's doing?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the guys who are real fighters believe that they can always win and always believe they're the best and don't ever doubt themselves.
Contract negotiations hit a boiling point, arguing that he deserved more pay. Nate stood firm and even refused to compete for an entire year, but the UFC held firm, unwilling to bend to his demands. Getting nowhere, he eventually came back, and in his very next fight, they paired him with one of the most difficult stylistic matchups possible. Rafael dos Anjos, an elite grappler with good forward pressure, was on his way to the belt, but to get there, he'd have to go through Diaz. And he did, without much resistance. For the first and only time in his career, Nate came in heavy, above the 156-pound limit. Throughout the week, he seemed like he just didn't care about the fight.
What makes Rafael dangerous, and why are you better?
I don't know. I think that's enough, man. It's good enough for the day. I'm over it.
When the day came, he was outgrappled by the Brazilian for 3 rounds and walked away with a meager $16,000 payout. We all thought that Diaz's failed attempts at a better contract, plus the series of losses, led him to simply stop caring about the game. But his very next performance against Michael Johnson would prove everyone wrong.
Diaz looked amazing. He's the best shape we've ever seen him in. Great game plan. He just put the pressure on Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson's never done really great with pressure. But I'll tell you the thing that I knew Michael Johnson was fucked is when his corner was going, "Don't quit, don't quit, stick with it, don't quit."
Yeah, what does that mean?
It means mentally he's shutting down.
When everything was pointing to Nate being over the hill, he put on the best performance of his career. He lit up Johnson with crisp 1-2s for 3 rounds, all while talking, mocking, and flat out humiliating him. For context on how good that win was, in his very next fight, Johnson went on to flatline Dustin Poirier. It was a fan favorite performance, but as good as that was, Nate's best move came at the post-fight interview.
Yeah, Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for, motherfucker. I'm gonna fight your ass.
Calling out the biggest star in the sport like that was certainly a bold move. Truth is, there wasn't the slightest chance Conor and the UFC were going to make that fight. McGregor was growing into the peak of his popularity and was already the featherweight champion. The only reason he'd move up to lightweight would be for the second belt on his waist. Why would he ever detour that plan to fight a journeyman who got beaten by several lightweights and welterweights already? The call-out went unnoticed, as expected, and the UFC went on with scheduling Conor versus the 155 champ Rafael dos Anjos. But as fate would have it, everything was about to change.
Late Monday afternoon, we found out from Rafael dos Anjos that he had a training accident on Friday. He was trying to ice it and rest it and see how it would feel on Monday. So we sent him to the doctor. A few hours later, we hear back that he has a broken foot.
When RDA pulled out just weeks before, the biggest card of the year was suddenly left without a main event. The UFC even tried to find a fitting matchup for McGregor, reaching out to guys like Aldo and Frankie Edgar. But the short notice made it hard to get a matchup. No one wanted to risk fighting an in-shape McGregor like that. The UFC was running out of options, and that's when Nate's nearly comical call-out came into play. With nowhere else to go, the UFC eventually settled for Nate Diaz. For most, the fight was seen as a formality, really. McGregor was in top form and wanted to remain active until he finally got to face the lightweight champion later in the year.
Then we call Nate Diaz. He's in and wants to fight, but you know, Nate can be a little difficult, so it took a long time. At the end of the day, we start to look at what the fans want, and more importantly, what does Conor want to do?
As for Nate, he had his work cut out for him. He was facing the most hyped fighter in the world on 2 weeks' notice. Conditioning had always been one of his strongest weapons, yet without even the shadow of a real camp, would he even be able to compete with the Irishman? Nonetheless, 2 weeks of training would have to do. He had been chasing an opportunity like that for years, and when it finally arrived, of course, the circumstances were stacked against him. Diaz was already quite popular among die-hard MMA fans by then, but to a wider audience, he was pretty much unknown. Unbeknownst to them, the biggest stage fit him perfectly.
What are your financial dreams? What to you means you've made it? A mansion, a Ferrari, what is it?
I don't know.
Say it like it is, Nate. William.
Who gives a is this the Money Channel? Who the is this shit?
The clash of personalities between the brash and loud Irishman, contrasting with Nate's chill yet ready to explode persona, provided some of the most memorable and funny moments ever. During that brief 2 weeks window before the fight took place, Nate Diaz was as big as he had ever been.
The build-up to the first fight, when Nate Diaz and Conor were doing interviews with each other, I was like, dude, Nate Diaz is the because Conor was getting into everybody's heads.
Yeah,
talking all that shit, and then he tried to do it to Nate, and
didn't work.
There's one interview with like CNN Business or some bullshit where he, like, Conor's sitting there and he's like, you're skinny fat, you're like a gazelle, I'm a lion, I'll fucking tear you apart. And Nate just goes, no one even knows what a gazelle is, dude.
But at the end of the day, talk is cheap if you can't back it up. To prove everyone wrong, Diaz would have to shock the world inside the cage. And somehow, that's precisely what he did.
I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
McGregor came out strong in the first round. He hit and wobbled Diaz several times during the first few minutes of the fight, making it look like another quick and decisive win for the Irishman. But unlike Aldo, Mendes, and the other featherweights, Nate was still standing in front of him after Conor landed. And as he grew in the fight, McGregor started to fade. By round 2, Conor was a lot slower, while Diaz, while battered, was still fresh.
He was quick and he had his things to say, and in my head I was just like, it's all right, next round I'm gonna be there too. And then when the next round started, it came quicker than I thought. And when I started landing shots, I was like, this is a wrap, because you ain't going no farther than this. I could tell by the landed punches and how his punches started. I started smothering his punches, and they started easing up. And I was like, and then I had him on the cage, and I was like, you don't have shit to say now, do you? And then I put a knee in his stomach, and I heard him go, huh, and I was like, yeah, this is good. And then all of a sudden, he's shooting for a takedown, and I'm like, oh, you're a wrestler now. You're a wrestler. I remember I'm the black belt in jiu-jitsu, and you're shooting on me now, so me and you know that this is a wrap. This is a wrap.
Nate handed the UFC's biggest star his first loss inside the organization, and more than that, really. He took the red panty night opportunity and flipped it on its head. Now, Diaz is no longer just Nick's little brother. He stood on his own, moving the needle his own way.
Do you think that we have another, Rousey, McGregor level star with Nate Diaz, given the way people are reacting to him now?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to deny. Yeah. He's a needle mover now.
In doing so, he threw a wrench into all the UFC's plans for McGregor. What was supposed to be just a quick stop before he reached double champ status became the detour that nearly changed everything. Conor would now have to right that wrong first. Therefore, an immediate rematch was in motion as soon as the first fight ended. For Nate, this meant another massive payday in a main event with the sport's biggest star, and the build-up for the fight was just as big, if not bigger.
I think it's a little silly, man. Got pictures of me up in his garage with him punch me in the face. Like, what the f? Who does that?
Let me see his full camp that he was talking shit about, that he was making excuses away, got the head slapped on for most of the fight. Let me see that full camp. I can't wait to see it. Bring the clinch, bring your jiu-jitsu, bring the whole Stockton. I'm ready for whatever he has to bring.
Your whole team, how about that?
Your whole team. Little crackhead SS. You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. Shut your f***ing mouth, you'll do nothing. You'll do f***ing nothing. Not one of you'll do nothing. Get the f*** out of here.
The rematch meant a lot for Conor as well. Another loss to Diaz would definitely hinder his star power and significantly water down his 155-pound ambitions. And this time, both fighters would get a full training camp preparing for each other. But while the promotion before the event felt like a rerun of the first one, in the actual main event of UFC 202, the outcome was completely different.
Conor just fought a smooth, smart game plan. He engaged from the outside where his speed was an advantage and did some damage, but didn't unload himself like he did in the first fight. In the first fight, he did that too, but then he unloaded himself. And Nate survived, and when he survived, Conor's gas tank was empty.
Right.
So this time, Conor was way more conservative.
Yeah, I'll see he would run away a little. But he would run.
He would run away. No, you could say it. He would run away. He ran away.
McGregor was far more methodical this time around, and while the fight was closely contested, the Irishman eventually got a majority decision victory. Conor later went on to win the 155 belt, then all the other historic stuff we all know he did. As for Diaz, he was defeated, but he was done losing on their terms. Nate went from making $15K per fight in someone else's undercard to being the main event of the best-selling UFC pay-per-view in history up until that point. The ball was in his court, and the rest of his career was defined by him doing what he wanted, when he wanted. Nate made so much money with the 2 McGregor fights that even the president questioned whether he would ever come back to the sport.
He doesn't need to fight in 2017. The guy made a lot of money. He's probably good.
So when are we going to see Nate?
I don't think I don't know if those guys will ever fight again.
Really?
We offer him fights all the time. But, you know.
I guess he says he doesn't want to fight nobodies. He wants big names.
In truth, he didn't sign up for a fight for 3 years. Many argued that he was waiting for a potential trilogy bout with Conor, but after the Mayweather boxing bout where McGregor earned tens of millions, the rubber match became highly unlikely. Dana White said that Nate was offered several fights during that time, but he only came back when it best suited him. In August 2019, Diaz finally returned to face former champion Anthony Pettis. This match would have been highly competitive a few years back, but by then, Pettis was already showing signs that his best years were behind him. Nate won relatively easily, beating Pettis for most of the fight and getting the unanimous decision nod. In terms of competitiveness, this fight didn't do much, but what it really did was cement him as one of the sport's biggest stars.
They were so high on Conor McGregor and all these other people, they didn't see. One of the reasons why the Conor fight was so big was because of Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is a star. When they put his face on the screen for the Pettis fight, I mean, the arena erupted. It was chaos. They went nuts.
Shortly after, Nate wasted no time calling out the hottest name on the roster. Jorge Masvidal was riding high off the viral flying knee that made him a superstar, and the matchup made complete sense. 2 gritty journeymen who peaked very late in their careers.
It is the fight that the fans wanted to see. Nate Diaz, called out Masvidal after his win over Pettis, and everybody's been talking about it. People have been hitting me up on social media telling me to get this done. I can now announce the fight is done.
This fight became so big that the promotion even created an entire new belt to put it on the line. Both athletes competed for the BMF title at UFC 244 in a fight that promised fireworks from the get-go. And when the two finally met inside the octagon, Masvidal sort of took over. He looked faster and more powerful, while Nate appeared rusty from the long layoff. Nate took a beating for 2.5 rounds, but as the fight wore on, he started to pick up the pace. But funnily enough, Masvidal looked like he was slowing down while Diaz was showing signs that he could take over the rest of the fight. However, whether Nate would really flip the script of that fight, we'll never know. After inspecting Nate's cut, the doctors waved it off, and Masvidal walked away as the BMF champion. Once again, Diaz was defeated, even though he mastered the art of losing upward.
I thought it was the same story as every fight. I've been cutting my last 5 fights in the same way, probably 10 fights.
He walked away with one more big payday. 2 years went by, and Diaz began expressing interest in competing outside of the UFC, particularly in boxing. But to do so, he'd have to fight out of his UFC contract, and there was no way in hell that Dana White would let a star as big as him off the hook. The promotion had every incentive to use his name to build new names in the roster, and that's exactly what it tried to do. So Nate went from fighting Masvidal straight into facing the #1 contender of the welterweight division, Leon Edwards. Given his performance in the BMF bout, few expected to see a competitive matchup. And for the most part, it wasn't. For 24 minutes, Leon completely dominated the fight. However, Nate only needed that minute left to make it the only part of the fight anyone would remember. He landed a crushing left hand on Edwards' chin, coming this close to putting an end to Leon's 10-fight undefeated streak.
Despite losing for 23-24 minutes, that last minute was so redemptive, and I think so fun for the crowd, and maybe even people watching at home, that they won't even care that he was, the real story is he just got thoroughly outclassed. But he's so capable, even in the trenches of lost causes, that you can't let go of your appreciation for him, and you can't ever overlook him. And in many ways, even though he lost, it was kind of quintessential Nate Diaz.
He continued to lose fights while coming out as the champion of moral victories. With only one fight left in his contract, the UFC had one last shot to build someone up using his name, and they spared no effort in doing so. The UFC lined him up against rising star Khamzat Chimaev, a fighter who, quite frankly, presented such a dangerous style that losing with grace would be nearly impossible. Diaz was a near 40-year-old undersized welterweight, while Khamzat was a young, hungry wrestler with a frame bigger than most middleweights. Adding to that, Chimaev has one of the most most aggressive wrestling games we've ever seen. But as fate would have it, the UFC was forced to switch opponents at the last minute after Hamza failed to make weight. Instead of facing a killer like Chimaev, Nate got a farewell fight against a far over-the-hill Tony Ferguson. Somehow, Diaz received a gracious send-off, something that rarely happens with older fighters in the UFC.
No matter what Nate does from here on out, I mean, the kid, this is his house. He's been here forever. It's been a blast having him here, and I wish him well.
After fighting out his contract, Nate quickly picked up a boxing match against Jake Paul, and now he's set to feature in the upcoming Netflix MMA card against Mike Perry. The event will also include Ronda Rousey and Francis Ngannou, and it's shaping up to be one of the biggest cards of the year.
What did you hear they offered Diaz?
The UFC?
No.
Oh,
Netflix.
Netflix? I heard 10 mil.
I heard it was more.
You probably know.
That's wild.
That's a lot of money. They're paying boys real money.
From making $15K per fight to becoming one of the highest paid UFC fighters, Nate defied all odds and reached success by challenging the very system that kept him down for so long. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe. And speaking of the Netflix card, if you want to watch our breakdown about how the Paramount deal is ruining the UFC, check out this video next.